This area is off limits, sir.
I have business here.
Not without approval.
We'll see.
Sir, this is a private event. Residents and invited guests only. She said it loud enough that the couple walking in behind him stopped mid-step just to watch. The old man standing in front of her didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice, didn't even blink. He just looked past her hand, past her pressed blazer, past the little gold name badge pinned to her chest that read Sandra Bellworth, HOA President, Magnolia Ridge. And he looked at the building behind her, and something crossed his face. Something quiet, something heavy, like a man looking at a photograph of someone he used to love. Now let me set the scene for you so you understand exactly what was happening here. Magnolia Ridge wasn't just some neighborhood. It was a neighborhood. The kind of place where the lawns look AI generated and every mailbox matches. 342 homes. A clubhouse with floor-to-ceiling glass. A man-made lake with actual imported koi fish. Homes starting at $800,000, topping out well above $2 million. And today? Today was the 20th anniversary celebration. 2 decades since the first family moved in. The HOA had organized a catered brunch, a historical photo display, a little ceremony where they were going to unveil a bronze plaque honoring the spirit of the Magnolia Ridge community. Big day, big energy. And right in the middle of the parking lot, between a pearl-white Mercedes and a blacked-out Range Rover, sat a truck that looked like it had driven through every decade since the 1990s and lost a fight with each one. A 1994 Ford F-150, rustle on the wheel wells. Paint so faded it was hard to tell if it had been blue or gray. The tailgate was held shut with a bungee cord. The passenger seat, you could see through the window, had a folded wool blanket, a steel thermos, and a stack of rolled-up papers held together with a rubber band. That truck belonged to the old man Sandra Bellworth, was currently blocking at the door. His name was Earl Granger. He was 68 years old, about 5'11", but he stood like he used to be taller. Broad shoulders that had started round, hands that looked like they'd been carved from oak, thick knuckles, deep creases, a scar across the left palm that had faded white with time. He wore a clean flannel shirt tucked into dark jeans, work boots that had been wiped down but would never pass for new, and a canvas jacket that had seen more weather than most rooftops. He didn't look like he belonged here. And everyone had already decided that. You know that look someone gives when they've already decided you're nobody? It's not anger. It's not even cruelty. Not exactly. It's something worse. It's dismissal. Like you're a problem to be solved quickly so they can get back to their mimosas. That's the look Sandra gave him. Are you with a catering company? She asked, her voice dropping into that slow, over-enunciated tone people use when they think you might not understand English very well. Because vendor entrance is around the back. Earl looked at her. Then he looked at the door. Then he looked back at her. I'm not with a catering company, he said. His voice was low, calm, the kind of voice that doesn't need volume, because it's carried by something heavier than sound. Then, are you here to pick someone up? Because we really can't have non-resident vehicles taking up spaces during the event. We're already short on parking. She glanced toward his truck, like it was leaking oil onto her reputation. I'm here for the anniversary, Earl said simply. Sandra tilted her head, the way people do when they're about to be patient in the most impatient way possible. This event is for residents of Magnolia Ridge. Do you live in Magnolia Ridge? A pause. No, Earl said. I don't. Then I'm afraid I can't let you in. I'm sorry. She wasn't sorry. Earl nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He just stepped to the side. Not leaving, just stepping aside, and looked up at the roofline of the clubhouse. And here's the first thing that should have made Sandra pause, if she'd been paying attention. He looked up at that roofline the way an architect looks at a building, not admiring it, checking it. His eyes traced the gutter line, moved to the corner joint, then dropped to the foundation edge near the landscaping bed. He crouched slightly, just slightly, and looked at where the concrete met the soil. Then he stood back up and nodded to himself, like he was satisfied. Sandra didn't notice any of it. A man in a navy sport coat walked up behind Sandra, mid-40s, Designer sunglasses pushed up on his head, teeth so white they probably had their own credit score. Everything okay here, Sandra? It's fine, Greg. This gentleman was just leaving. Greg looked at Earl, then looked at the truck, then looked back at Earl. You need direction somewhere, buddy? Buddy? You ever notice how that word can be a handshake or a shove, depending on who's saying it? No, Earl said. I know exactly where I am. Greg smiled. Not a kind smile. The kind of smile that says, I'm about to handle this. Look, I don't know if someone gave you the wrong address, but this is a gated community. We've had some issues with solicitors lately, and I'm not selling anything, Earl said. And we just want to make sure the event goes smoothly. No hard feelings. There's a gas station about half a mile down on Ridgemont if you need to. I know where the gas station is, Earl said quietly. It used to be a peach orchard. Owner's name was Lyle Fenton. He sold the land in 2002. Silence. Greg blinked. Sandra blinked. That was the second clue. And once again, they let it sail right over their heads. Greg recovered quickly, chuckled. Well, sounds like you've been around the area. But I'm sure you understand. We can't just let anyone walk in. Earl looked at Greg. Then he looked at Sandra. Then he took a slow breath and turned away. He walked back toward his truck. And if the story ended here, it would just be a sad Tuesday morning for a man in an old flannel shirt. But the story doesn't end here. Not even close. Earl didn't leave. He walked to his truck, opened a passenger door, and sat on the edge of the seat with the door open. He unscrewed the steel thermos, poured himself some coffee into the cap, and just sat there, looking at the neighborhood. A woman walking her dog paws on the sidewalk. She pulled the leash a little tighter, crossed to the other side of the street, didn't wave. Two teenagers cutting through the parking lot on their way to the clubhouse glanced at his truck. One of them whispered something. The other laughed. A man in golf attire walked past carrying a foil-wrapped dish. He looked at Earl, looked at the truck, and said, without even stopping, if you're here about the landscaping, we already have a crew. Earl sipped his coffee. Now, I need you to understand something about Earl Granger. This man had every reason to stand up, to shout, to pull out his phone, and make one call that would have made every single person in that parking lot choke on their champagne. But that wasn't Earl. Earl was the kind of man who measured twice and cut once, and that applied to words just as much as lumber. So he sat, and he waited. For what? You'll see. While he waited, a young woman came out of the clubhouse carrying a box of printed programs for the ceremony. She was maybe 25, wearing a Magnolia Ridge Events polo, clearly part of the planning team. She was struggling with the box. It was oversized and she couldn't see over the top. She stumbled on the curb. Earl was off that truck seat before the box even tilted. He caught one side with his left hand, steadied her elbow with his right, and the whole thing lasted about 2 seconds. Careful, he said. That curb's got a lip on it. Always has. They poured a 1/4 inch too high on the east side. The young woman looked at him. How do you know that? Earl paused, half smiled. Lucky guess. Third clue. Right there. Plain as day. She looked at him for a moment longer than anyone else had all morning, like she was actually seeing him. I'm Maya, she said. Are you here for the event? Trying to be, Earl said. What do you mean, trying? Earl glanced toward the door. Seems I don't fit the dress code. Maya looked at his flannel, looked at his boots, looked at his truck, and then she did something nobody else had done all morning. She looked at his face. Come on, she said. You can help me carry this in. The clubhouse was beautiful. You had to give them that. Vaulted ceilings, exposed beamwork, a stone fireplace that anchored the main room. The anniversary display was set up along the east wall, blown up photos from 2004, 2005, the early construction days, the first families moving in. Earl stopped walking. He was staring at one of the photos. It showed a man standing on a dirt lot, hard hat on, blueprints unrolled across the hood of a truck. Behind him, a skeleton with framing rose against a wide-open sky. The man in the photo was younger, leaner, stronger in the shoulders. But the hands were the same. The scar on the left palm was the same. Maya was arranging programs on a table nearby. She hadn't noticed, but someone else did. An older man in the corner, maybe 70, white hair, quiet eyes, had been watching Earl since he walked in. He hadn't said a word. He just watched. And when Earl stopped at that photo, the old man set down his coffee cup and started walking over. Before he got there, Sandra appeared. Excuse me. How did you get in here?" Every head in the room turned. "I invited him to help me carry boxes," Maya said quickly. "Maya, you can't just invite people in off the street. This is a residents-only event." "Sir, I've already asked you once." "Sandra." Earl's voice was quiet, but something in it made her stop. Not fear, not authority. "Just wait. I'm not going to cause any trouble. I just want to see the place one more time." "One more time? You've never been here." "Yes," Earl said. "I have." Greg appeared again, this time with 2 other board members flanking him like backup singers. "Okay, that's enough. Sandra, I'll handle this." "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to leave, or we'll call community security." The room was watching now. Every single person. Forks paused over plates of fruit. Conversations halted mid-sentence. A child tugged her mother's sleeve and asked why everyone was being mean to the old man. The mother shushed her, and then the white-haired man in the corner spoke. "You might want to hold off on that security call, Greg." Everyone turned. The man's name was Harold Yamamoto. He was one of the original homeowners, one of the very first families to move into Magnolia Ridgeback in 2004. "Harold, do you know this man?" Sandra asked. Harold walked closer. He looked at Earl. Earl looked at him, and something passed between them that didn't need words. "Know him?" Harold said. He almost laughed, but it came out as something closer to disbelief. "Sandra, do you see that photo on the wall? The one with the man on the dirt lot?" Sandra looked. Everyone looked. "That's the developer," Sandra said. "That's the man who built Magnolia Ridge. We've never been able to identify him for the plaque. The original development company was sold years ago, and—" "His name," Harold said, "is Earl Granger, and he's standing right in front of you." The room didn't gasp. It didn't erupt. It did something worse. It went completely, devastatingly silent. Sandra looked at the photo, looked at Earl, looked at the photo again. Her mouth opened slightly. No words came out. Greg took off his sunglasses. Slowly, Maya, still holding a stack of programs, turned and stared at Earl with wide eyes. Then she looked down at the curb story, the rolled-up papers in his truck, the way he'd looked at the roofline, and you would see every puzzle piece snapping into place behind her eyes. "Earl Granger didn't just build a neighborhood," Harold continued, his voice steady and deliberate. "He designed it. He fought with the county for 3 years to get the zoning approved. He personally planted the first magnolia trees along the main boulevard. That's where the name comes from. He laid the foundation of this clubhouse with his own crew. When the funding fell through halfway through construction, he mortgaged his own home, his personal home, to keep the project alive. Every street, every lot line, every drainage grade in this neighborhood came from this man's mind and this man's hands." Harold paused. He drove that same truck back then, too. Earl stood perfectly still. He didn't puff his chest, didn't cross his arms, didn't say "I told you so." He just stood there, holding his thermos cap of coffee that had gone cold, looking at a room full of people who lived in the world he'd built, a world they refused to let him enter. Sandra's face went through about 6 different colors. Her hand, the same one she'd held up like a stop sign, was now pressed against her own chest. "Mr. Granger, we didn't know." "I know you didn't," Earl said, and there was no venom in it, no satisfaction, just truth. Greg stepped forward. "Sir, listen, I owe you an apology. You thought a man in a flannel shirt and a rusty truck didn't belong in a place like this," Earl said. He didn't say it with anger. He said the way you'd read a weather report. Just fact. It's all right. Wouldn't be the first time. He took a slow breath and looked around the room. At the beams he'd selected from a lumber yard in Virginia. At the stone fireplace he'd argued with his foreman about for 2 weeks because he wanted real field stone, not veneer. At the windows he'd chosen specifically so the morning light would hit the east wall at just the right angle. "I didn't come here to make anyone feel bad," Earl said. "I came because 20 years ago I stood on an empty piece of land and imagined people making lives here, raising families, feeling safe. That's all I wanted to see that happened." He looked at the photo on the wall one more time. And it did. He set the thermos cap on a nearby table, nodded once to Harold, and turned toward the door. Maya stepped forward. "Mr. Granger, wait. We're about to unveil the dedication plaque. We never had a name to put on it. We do now." Earl stopped. He didn't turn around right away. He just stood there for a moment, facing the door, shoulders rising once with a deep breath. Then he turned back. "I'd like that," he said quietly. "What happened next is the part that stays with you." Sandra Bellworth personally walked Earl Granger to front row. She didn't just offer him a seat. She pulled the chair out herself. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, from the specific kind of shame that hits when you realize you became the person you always swore you'd never be. Greg brought him a fresh cup of coffee. Real cup this time, not a thermos cap. The ceremony went on, but it was different now. The energy in the room had shifted the way air changes right before rain. Everything felt heavier, more honest, more real. When they unveiled the plaque, it still read, asterisk, dedicated to the spirit of the Magnolia Ridge community. Asterisk. But Sandra announced, her voice cracking just once, that a new plaque would be commissioned, and it would read, asterisk, built by Earl Granger, a man who gave this community everything, including a lesson we should have learned sooner. Asterisk. The room stood, not because someone told them to, not because it was polite, because when you're standing in a building a man's hands built, and you just watch 3 people try to throw him out of it, standing is the least you can do. Earl didn't wave, didn't make a speech. He just nodded, that same slow nod he'd been giving all morning, the one that said, "I see you, and I'm not holding it against you, and that's not weakness, it's a choice." After the ceremony, people approached him, one by one. Some shook his hand. Some couldn't look him in the eye. A few told him which house was theirs, and he, without hesitation, told them the lot number, the foundation date, and in 2 cases, a specific problem with the northwest gutter joint they might want to check. He knew every house, every single one, because he hadn't just built them, he'd raised them, the way a parent raises a child, with worry, with sacrifice, with midnight prayers that would all turn out okay. Earl Granger drove out of Magnolia Ridge at 11:47 that morning. Same rusty truck, same bungee cord on the tailgate, same wool blanket on the passenger seat. But the rolled-up papers were gone. He'd left them with Maya. 20-year-old original blueprints for the neighborhood, hand-drawn, annotated in pencil, coffee stained in the corner. She unrolled them on the clubhouse table after he left, and in the bottom right corner, in small handwriting that had faded but never disappeared, was a note Earl had written to himself 2 decades ago. Asterisk, build it so good they forget who built it. Asterisk, Maya pinned that blueprint to the wall next to the photo, and it's still there today. Now, here's the part one haven't told you yet. 3 weeks later, at a city council meeting across town, a woman walked in wearing a coat that had seen better days. She sat in the back row, didn't speak, didn't raise her hand, just listened while the council debated whether to rename the new public library. Nobody asked her opinion. Nobody offered her a seat close to the front. The council chair actually asked if she was in the right meeting. She smiled politely and said she was. What nobody in that room knew, not the council chair, not the reporters, not the architect who presented the building plans, was that the woman in the old coat had written a single check that funded the entire project. But that's a story for next time.